This podcast is a work of historical interpretation. While we strive for accuracy, some aspects of history are open to interpretation and debate. Thank you for listening. Welcome back to Time Tellers, the show where history isn't just remembered, it's re-examined.
Yay.
Today we dig into one of the most controversial and explosive, quite literally, episodes in American protest history. We're talking about the Weather Underground Organization, a radical left-wing group born out of the 1960s anti-war movement. Their campaigns of bombings in major cities like New York, Washington, D.C., and Chicago shook the nation. But what pushed them into embracing violence? Who were they? And what remains of their legacy? Before we begin with the official narrative, there's a semi-local possible connection. Well, it's sort of local. Cleveland's not far.
Field trip?
No.
Yeah, you're right. I would never go to Ohio. I know who's from there.
I'm not from there.
You claim you are multiple times, according to this.
I grew up there. I was born in Texas.
See?
The bombing of Rodin's The Thinker statue outside the Cleveland Museum of Art on March 24th, 1970, remains one of the most mysterious acts of vandalism tied to that era's political unrest. The statue's base was destroyed by a homemade bomb packaged with dynamite, leaving the sculptor's lower legs mangled, damage that was never repaired. Though no group claimed responsibility, law enforcement at the time suspected possible ties to radical left-wing organizations, including the Weather Underground Organization. Due to the timing, just weeks after the Greenwich Village explosion, that we'll talk about later, and the method of attack, which matched other WUO bombings, that's why they thought it was possible. However, the Thinker was not a traditional political or military target, and no direct evidence has ever linked the Weather Underground to the bombing. As a result, the attack is still unsolved and often viewed as an enigmatic act of anti-establishment protest rather than a confirmed WUO operation. Instead of attempting a complete restoration or replacement, the Cleveland Museum of Art made the intentional decision to leave the sculpture as it was, preserving the damage as part of the artwork's history. So you can go see it today.
Yep, still sitting right outside the door.
Mm-hmm. Let's go back to the storm before the storm to talk about the larger organization and events. The Weather Underground didn't come from nowhere. It began as a faction of the Students for a Democratic Society, SDS, a leftist student organization critical of U.S. imperialism, civil rights abuses, and the Vietnam War.
More Vietnam War?
I know.
Really?
Unintention.
I mean, what is it good for?
Absolutely nothing. You're proud of me for that one, aren't you?
Yeah.
By 1969, SDS was splintering. One group wanted to remain peaceful. Another group, the Weathermen, later known as the Weather Underground, argued that only violent resistance could end America's crimes. Global revolutionaries like Che Guevara. I know. Che Guevara and Ho Chi Minh inspired them. Yeah.
Oh, so you got...
I got
you're
that
50%.
name right. Oh, my gosh.
50%? That's enough to pass for school, right?
No, you have to have 65.
Since when? I thought it was 60.
Anything below 65 is an F.
When did that change?
As long as I've been teaching there.
Oh, when I was in school, it was 60 and under. Because 60 to 70 was D.
Mm-mm.
Did they get rid of D's?
No.
Did they bump up A's?
Yeah, it's like you have to have at least a 93.
Oh, okay. So they slid it all out.
Yeah. Domestically, they aligned themselves with Black liberation movements like the Black Panthers. believing white radicals had a duty to bring the war home. The Black Panther Party and the Weather Underground connected due to shared revolutionary goals, including opposition to racism, capitalism, and the Vietnam War. The Weathermen, mostly white radicals, saw it as their duty to act in solidarity with Black liberation movements and often echoed the Panthers' call for systematic change. Influential leaders like Fred Hampton helped build early coalitions between the groups, and his assassination in 1969 further radicalized the Weather Underground. Both groups targeted state institutions and supported political prisoners, though tensions existed over privilege and tactics. So one of the people that I'll mention is Bernadine Dorn. She was one of the group's leaders, and she famously said in 1969, quote, "Revolutionary violence is the only way," unquote. That fall, they organized the Days of Rage in Chicago, which took place from October 8th to the 11th, 1969. Their guiding slogan was, quote, "The streets belong to the people," unquote. They specifically chose Chicago because of the Democratic National Convention riots in 1968, during which police brutally attacked anti-war demonstrators. To the Weathermen, the city represented a battleground of police repression and state power. Despite grand plans, only a few hundred activists showed up, far fewer than anticipated. Most were young, white, middle-class radicals. The demonstrations quickly devolved into vandalism, violence, and open street fighting with the police. Weather Underground activists rampaged through Chicago's Gold Coast, smashing windows, damaging cars, and attacking symbols of capitalism and the state. The police responded with force, leading to violent street battles. Over 280 people were arrested, and significant property damage occurred, estimated at $250,000. Though turnout was far smaller than expected, the event marked a turning point as the group shifted from public protests to underground militant action. This was just the beginning. Dun, dun, dun. Sorry. After the violent failures of Days of Rage, the Weather Underground went underground, literally. They became a clandestine network. By early 1970, the group had begun building bombs. Then came tragedy. Because usually bombs lead to tragedy.
Sometimes.
Most of the time. March 6, 1970, Greenwich Village, New York. 3 members were killed when a nail bomb accidentally exploded in a townhouse that they were using as a bomb factory. The explosion occurred at 18 West 11th Street, a 4-story townhouse in a quiet, upscale neighborhood of Manhattan's Greenwich Village. The home belonged to Diana Ogden's family, her family's friend, and it was being used covertly by Weather Underground members as a bomb-making site. Investigations later revealed that the bomb being built was packed with nails and dynamite, designed to act as a massive anti-personnel device. The device was purportedly intended for a dance at Fort Dix, so it was meant to kill soldiers. The explosion rattled the city and radicalized the survivors further. At approximately 11:55 a.m., the massive blast tore through the townhouse, leveling it and sending debris flying across the street. So those who were killed in the explosion were Diana Ogden, who was a former teacher and one of the group's key members. Terry Robbins was one of the most militant and forceful voices in the group, and Ted Gold, another weatherman who was deeply involved in the group's planning. 2 others, Kathy Wilkerson and Kathy Bodine, were inside the house but miraculously escaped. They fled the scene and went underground for years. The explosion devastated the Weathermen emotionally and philosophically. Many saw it as a wake-up call. Afterward, the group rebranded as the Weather Underground Organization. and shifted focus from anti-personnel bombing to symbolic property destruction, always warning of bombings ahead of time. Bill Ayers, who was a founding member, later on said about that bomb, quote, "That bomb was not defensible. It was catastrophic, and it changed us," unquote. After the townhouse explosion, the Weather Underground reevaluated. They decided to focus on property, not people. So that was nice of them.
Sure.
They issued communications before each bombing to warn authorities aiming to destroy symbols of imperialism, not lives. These messages were typically delivered anonymously by phone or through written statements sent to media outlets or other organizations.
That was nice of them, too.
Right. And done at night, too. Which means there's less chance of people being in buildings. So,
Or in the case of the statue, nobody's in a statue.
no. So, May 1970.
Unless they were like a cast, a statue cast that somebody was inside that they didn't know about.
May 1970, New York City Police Headquarters. A bomb ripped through the second floor. No injuries, but the message was clear. This is in response to police repression. That's what their message stated.
How'd they get it onto the second floor?
That's a good question, actually. And just the fact that most police headquarters are like manned 24/7, especially in New York City. Like, how was there no injuries? I mean, they obviously warned them, but still, like, police have even then probably had some sort of bomb squad. I think maybe not like we do today, but I would think they'd have.
Unless that was just one of their buildings that's all offices that's closed at that point,
That's true. That's possible. It might not be it's headquarters, so it might not be where they, like, the beat cops go and stuff. That's possible.
They might have the lobby or something, but that'd be it.
Right. March 1st, 1971, the U.S. Capitol bombing. Call was placed to a news organization and Capitol Police just minutes before the bomb detonated, stating, quote, "This is in protest of the U.S. invasion of Laos," unquote. This explosion caused $300,000 in damages, but again, luckily there were no injuries. The explosion occurred at night after business hours, and the bomb exploded in a restroom on the Senate side of the Capitol building. I wonder if the Senate side had a significance versus... I
don't know.
September 1971, at the New York Department of Corrections. This bombing followed the Attica prison uprising, which we did an episode on.
Yes, we did.
Yep. The Weathermen... I keep saying Weathermen. The Weather Underground expressed solidarity with Black prisoners. They're following up on that. They're like putting their own signature to it in solidarity with their Black Panther partner. May 19th, 1972, the Pentagon bombing. The group issued a detailed communication to the press that day. This says, quote, "We attacked the Pentagon to protest the U.S. bombing of Hanoi in North Vietnam. We stand with the people of the world in fighting American imperialism," unquote. They deliberately chose May 19th to mark the shared birthday of Ho Chi Minh and Malcolm X, both revolutionary icons in their eyes. Yeah. Chicago wasn't just the birthplace of the Weather Underground, it was also a key target in safe house location. While no major bombings occurred in Chicago after the Days of Rage, the city remained the emotional and logistical core. From basements and back rooms, operative built pipe bombs, wrote manifestos, and sheltered fugitives. The FBI called it an urban guerrilla cell network. And this was still during the time of Hoover. Like, this was right before he finally retired. The city also bore the scars of the 1969 police assassination of Black Panther leader Fred Hampton. Some believed his killing deepened the group's resolve, which I mentioned earlier. In the book called Fugitive Days, Bill Ayers who was a founding member, described Chicago as, quote, the spiritual center of our movement, unquote, even though they moved from place to place after going underground. And again, Bernadine Dorn, who I mentioned earlier, was originally from Wisconsin and later a Chicago resident, continued to work as an activist and law professor in Chicago after resurfacing in the 1980s. So she never left Chicago, really. Well, she might have temporarily. But by 1970, the FBI had launched COINTELPRO, a counterintelligence program targeting radical groups, particularly leftist movements and black movements. The Chicago Police Department's Red Squad and the FBI Chicago Fieldhouse prioritized weather underground surveillance. J. Edgar Hoover called the weather underground, quote, the greatest threat to the internal security of the United States, unquote. The agency spent millions infiltrating the group using surveillance, informants, and illegal wiretaps.
Really? I never would have thought that. Why would they do that?
FBI documents from the COINTELPRO program and later court records confirmed that Chicago was a known site for safe houses, logistical planning, and bomb construction. In March 1970, Chicago police discovered a WUO bomb factory on the city's north side, which contained explosives and related materials. This discovery led to the cessation of WUO activities in the town at that time. One of the most infamous cases was Larry Grothwall, an undercover FBI informant who penetrated the group and testified about their operations. However, many FBI efforts were later ruled illegal, which complicated prosecutions. Journalists, of course, were obsessed with the weathermen. It makes for good front page. I wouldn't say good, but no. 1970 headline from the Washington Post, for example. It states, "Terror in our midst. The revolution will be bombed." I didn't write it. It was the Washington Post in 1970. I was not alive then. The New York Times covered the townhouse explosion in dramatic detail. Eyewitnesses described bricks flying, bodies buried in rubble, and a girl, Kathy Wilkerson, fleeing barefoot and seemed to be dazed and confused. And I'm not talking about the movie. Later, memoirs from the group members offered chilling insights. Bill Ayers, in his memoir, Fugitive Days, wrote, "We felt the bombs were our words when no one would listen." Former NYPD officer Frank Serpico, in interviews, once said, quote, "We knew they didn't want to kill, but that didn't make it any less terrifying," unquote. Because even if they weren't intentionally trying to kill anyone, they could very easily. It is a bomb. Who was president at the time? Nixon.
Again?
I know.
Are we
not doing this intentionally, guys.
Are we up to Nixon the fourth? Well, but this will be like 2 weeks after the last Nixon.
Well, yeah. President Richard Nixon was outspoken about what he called a rising tide of domestic violence. Following major weather underground bombings like the Capitol bombing in 1971, Nixon used these events to reinforce the need for law and order. In one public address, Nixon said, quote, "We will not tolerate violence or anarchy in our streets. Bombers and revolutionaries will be met with the full force of the law," unquote. Chicago Mayor Richard J. Daley condemned the group following the Days of Rage in 1969. He called the destruction, quote, "criminal behavior masquerading as protest," unquote, and demanded federal support in cracking down on radical organizations. By the late 1970s, the war was over, Nixon had resigned, Vietnam was ending, the new left had crumbled. Remember, COINTELPRO, the counterintelligence program, run by the FBI from 1956 to 1971, was deemed illegal because it involved widespread constitutional violations, including the denial of First Amendment rights, unlawful surveillance, entrapment, and harassment of U.S. citizens, all carried out without proper legal oversight. Because of COINTELPRO's illegalities, many charges were dropped. For example, Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn surrendered in 1980. Neither served any prison time. As I stated earlier, Dorn eventually became a law professor in Chicago, and Ayers taught at the University of Illinois. Kathy Boudin, who was one of those survivors, was later involved in a Brinks robbery, 1981. She was the getaway driver.
Didn't we do an episode on that?
Not this one. No.
Oh, that was a different Brinks one?
Yeah. She was sentenced to 20 years and paroled in 2003. I have a little note here. It even says note. Members associated with the Weather Underground organization were involved in the infamous 1981 Brinks armored truck robbery in Nanuet, New York, though by that time, the WUO itself was largely inactive and its members had splintered or joined other radical groups. So it wasn't really something organized by Weather Underground organization itself, but members of it. Like on their own,
it doesn't
like
really
side
count.
job.
So it's unrelated.
Yeah, but it's like a side job, side hustle that they were doing. Some members remained fugitives. Others, like Mark Rudd, turned to nonviolent activism. In 2009, he published a memoir, Underground: My Life with SDS and the Weathermen, reflecting on his radical past with both regret and insight. He wrote, quote, "I believed the revolution was imminent, but I was wrong. I confused moral outrage with strategy," unquote. Mark Rudd today is a vocal critic of political extremism, advocating for nonviolent organizing, democratic reform, and learning from the failures of the 1960s radicalism. And as stated, I think I stated this, or if I didn't make it clear, no one was killed in the WUO bombings after 1970. Of course, many came close, because again, they were bombs. I'm just saying. The Weather Underground organization remains divisive. I think even if you talk about it today, for those who know about it. To some, they were idealists, pushed to extremes by an immoral war. To others, they were terrorists in denial. In recent years, well, actually now it's not that recent, but Bill Ayers became a lightning rod when his connection to the then Senator Barack Obama surfaced during the 2008 election. The right used it as proof of Obama's alleged radical ties, though the connection was minor. So I looked up the connection because I don't remember hearing about this, but maybe I just forgot. Bill Ayers and Barack Obama had limited professional interactions in Chicago during the 1990s and early 2000s through shared work on nonprofit boards, including the Chicago Annenberg Challenge and the Woods Fund. They lived in the same Hyde Park neighborhood, and Ayers once hosted a political meet and greet for Obama's first state Senate campaign, though other people organized it. He just opened his house for it or whatever. Both men described their relationship as distant and casual with no evidence of personal or ideological closeness. Modern movements like Antifa, Occupy, and particular wings of climate activism echo aspects of the Weather Underground, but few of them embrace their violent tactics, at least to the degree that they embrace their violent tactics. History doesn't just record like we are doing right now. So it doesn't just record what we did, it remembers what we were willing to do. If you are making a bomb, you are willing for the possibility that somebody will die from it. The Weather Underground attempted to communicate with fire. Some say their flames were righteous, while others argue they were reckless. What do you think? Righteous or reckless?
Well, it depends.
On?
I mean, it would be more reckless if they weren't warning people.
Fair point.
Yeah. And everything they were attacking was insured.
True.
So they were just...
And people over property is definitely a good thing.
And they were just causing, causing inconveniences.
Chaos and mayhem.
Yeah. Inconveniences. Huh?
Well, that's all I've really got.
But we got to take up more time.
Thank you for joining us on Time Tellers. If you like this episode and want to hear more about other various devastating events in America, let us know. Don't forget to leave us a review. Give us those 5 stars. We can always use those. Those are so nice. Leave a comment if you can or want to. Share it with a history buff. And join us next time, where we will dive into the mysterious disappearance of the Liberty Bell. No, just kidding. I'm pretty sure it's still there. We should make up an episode. Yeah. Who stole the Liberty Bell? Where in the world is Carmen Sandiego? And did she take the Liberty Bell with her? Nothing.
Really?
I don't know.
Are we going to get into the basement of the Alamo, too, while we're at it?
Oh, the Alamo. Remember the Alamo.
What are we remembering?
That's just the rallying call.
But what are we supposed to remember?
The Alamo.
It's a fort.
Everybody was killed?
That happened at several forts.
Yes. But that was never mind.
And that wasn't even in the